This presentation is about Australia, a continent that's on the southeast, found by William James in 1606. In the northern part of the world, we have much more land than in the south, so Aristotle, Ptolemy, and Macrobius believed that there has to be something in the south, so they brought some people to explore the southern part of the world. In 1606, two of the three explorer groups actually found the continent that we are calling today Australia. But they were not the only people there. The native people, who are called Aborigines, were there before. The Aborigines had a population between 300 to 700,000 people. Before the colonization of the Britons, there were 200 to 700 different tribes of the Aborigines, and they all lived by hunting and collecting fruits. In 1788 lived 1 million Aborigines, and in 1920 just 60,000, because the Europeans killed a lot of them in wars, but mostly because of the diseases they brought to Australia. The ancients thus came to Australia 40,000 to 60,000 years ago from the north, so the Aborigines are a really old native tribe. Years later, England took over the east coast and called it New South Wales, but before it was all in the hands of Holland. England called the area where they landed Sydney. The Europeans started to make a lot of colonies there, but the Aborigines were not really happy about it, because their own land was taken away, so the war between the Aborigines and the Europeans started. The Black War is the most known war where thousands of Aborigines and British soldiers died, and the Black War lasted 12 years. After the victory of the Britons, the Aborigines had to go either to Northern Territory or Western Australia. Today, 30% of the Aborigines live in Northern Territory. The Uluru or Ayers Rock is a massive sandstone monolith in the Australian state Northern Territory. For the Aborigines is the Uluru holy, because they believe that ancestral beings made the caves in the Uluru. It reaches 350 meters high, it's 3 kilometers wide, and in the underground it is 513 meters deep. The Ayers Rock is made out of Arco sandstone, that's 35% quartz, and other rocks like granite or basalt. The sand of the Ayers Rock has iron in it, and when the iron rusts it gets red, so that's the reason why the Ayers Rock is red.
Around this time, tectonic shifts were thrusting the Petermann Ranges up into the sky across the centre of Australia. These ranges were similar in size and scale to the Alps today. Over time, the granite was eroded, mixed with sand, by an inland river system that flowed into the region. And this mixed sediment was spread out over a vast area until there was no mountain left. Over time, an inland sea, now known as the Amadeus Basin, formed over the centre of Australia. By around 400 million years ago, at the bottom of this sea, the sand and gravel were being compressed into a new sedimentary rock. Over time, these sediment layers built up, and then these rocks were squished together into different folds, which is why we have these striations or little ribs running vertically down the side.
This video showed you how the Ayers Rock was made millions of years ago. In 1915, Australia declared war to Germany because they were a British colony in the First World War and England was against Germany. Australia created AIF, the Australian Imperial Force, to help England and other countries who were on the same side as England. In the First World War, 331,814 soldiers from AIF helped England. This was 13% of the male population. 2,100 women also helped there, but mostly as nurses for AIF. In the beginning, Australia just wanted to send 20,000 men. The AIF fought in Egypt, half Iceland, in Turkey called Gallipoli, Gaza, and in the Western Front. 64% of the AIF soldiers got wounded and 18% died. The Battle of Gallipoli was on a Turkish half island called Gallipoli on February the 19th, 1915 to January the 9th, 1916. The battle was on the European side and the Asian side from the island. The Australians fought with France, New Zealand, Newfoundland, British India, France West Africa and Great Britain against the Osmanian Empire, Austria, Hungary and Germany in the Battle of Gallipoli. The intent was an alliance between Great Britain, France and Russia, and they wanted to use Gallipoli as a base to beat Istanbul, and because Australia fought with Great Britain they also attacked Gallipoli. In the end they were unable to conquer Gallipoli because the protection of the island was too good, and on both sides died 100,000 soldiers and on each side got 250,000 soldiers injured. April the 25th is the Remembrance Day of the Battle of Gallipoli in Australia today, where thousands of people pray for the soldiers who lost their lives in Gallipoli. The day is called Anzac Day because the division they fought with was called Anzac, and that means Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. On February the 22nd, 1917, were the Anzacs subordinate to Great Britain for fighting in the city Gaza in Egypt on the Palestine front. On March 26, 1917, the British soldiers attacked the city directly while the Anzacs tried to bypass them from the east. The commands of Lieutenant Dobell was one reason why they lost with 5,900 soldiers who died, because his commands were not clever or good. After the defeat in the battle, the Anzac got new lieutenants, and after days of constant bombing, Gaza evacuated, and Anzac and the Britons have won. 64% of the AIF soldiers got wounded and 18% died. 64 AIF soldiers got the Victoria Cross. That's the highest award you can get from the United Kingdom, and it stands for bravery. Australia joined the Second World War 2 days after Germany attacked Poland, which was on September the 3rd, 1939, and they were on the same side with the Allies against Germany. On February the 19th, 1942, Japan started an air raid on Darwin. Darwin was a city near the ocean with 5,000 people who lived there. The city was used as a strategic base where the Australians kept weapons, and it was used for the Allies who were stationed there. Kido Butai was the name of the biggest war fleet on that time in the Pacific owned by Japan, and with those air carriers they bombed one of Australia's most important bases, and sadly just 3,000 people got evacuated. On that day 320 people died in Darwin. Australia lost 23 planes, 10 ships and 25 ships got damaged. It was a hard loss because they only had their 30 planes and 45 ships.
Largest single attack on Australian soil, but for many the bombing of Darwin remains a silent legacy.
Nobody says anything about what happened in Darwin, and Darwin was a battle. Ask the blokes that were in the ships, they're being pounded. And as far as I'm concerned, the name should be the Battle for Darwin.
Jack Mulholland is one of few surviving veterans from that day. He was 20, an anti-aircraft gunner with the 14th Heavy Anti-Aircraft Battery, when Japanese bombs rained out of the morning sky.
Ships blowing up, oil on the harbour alight, blokes trying to swim. I had a fantastic view of the harbour, and it's a battle which has never been acknowledged. It wasn't hard to imagine they were enemy, because most planes we'd ever seen in one time were 10. There were 188 in this group that was coming in.
And this man was in one of those planes. Kaname Harada, a Japanese Zero fighter pilot who escorted the bombers onto their Darwin targets.
Naturally, I was expecting that some Australian interceptors would be waiting for us over the port, but actually we didn't see any at all. So we maintained our altitude and provided air cover, while our dive bombers attacked the ships without much resistance.
Overall, 253 people that we know about were killed. The Japanese, it was a very successful attack as far as they were concerned. They sank at least 4 principal vessels in Darwin Harbour, and for the loss of only 10 of their aircraft. The intention of the attack was to terrify Australia and its allies and make sure that that they stayed in Australia. Darwin was going to be a base for operations, naval and air operations, against the war that was raging in Southeast Asia.
This video showed you the view of the Australian and Japanese side with the explanation of Brett Madeira about the attack on Darwin. In the Second World War got nearly 29,000 Australians in war captivity. Most of them got arrested in Greece on the island Crete in 1941 and 1,400 of them were shot down aircraft crews. In March 1944 were 4 Australians executed because they tried to run away from the jail they were in. During the Second World War, Australia brought 1 million soldiers to the battlefield, and out of this 1 million soldiers, the 27,073 died and 23,477 got wounded. In the Second World War, from start to ending, they fought in 2 battles, one against Germany, Italy, and the other one was with Great Britain against Japan. In the First World War, Australia fought on the Western Front, but in the Second World War there were not much soldiers in Europe. Mostly Australia attacked Germany by plane and they were really successful with that. After World War II in 1945, Australia became a member of the UNO. UNO means United Nations Organization, which has 193 different countries in it. UNO is an alliance to keep the world at peace and the human rights. Sir Edmund Barton was born on January the 18th, 1849 in Sydney, and he died on January the 7th, 1920 in Medlow-Bath, a small city in Australia. On January the 1st, 1901, he became the Prime Minister of Australia to September the 24th, 1903. Scott John Morrison was born on May the 13th, 1968 in Waverley, a city in Australia. On August the 24th, 2018 he became the new Prime Minister of Australia after Malcolm Turnbull left. Willem Jens was born in 1570 in Amsterdam and died in 1630. With his small ship the Dolphin, he found Australia even if there are hints that China, France or Portugal were on Australia before, but he is the only one that can be proven that he was there the first. The rabbit-proof fence was a 3,200 kilometers long fence built in 1901 to 1908 to stop rabbits and other animals to jump over to the farmland, and it was made for stopping diseases. There's also a movie about one story from the rabbit-proof fence, and this movie is about 3 young girls who are living in Jigalong, a small village in the western of Australia. One day a police officer took those 3 girls to an old school against their will. The 3 girls were very unhappy there, because they missed their family and their own village. One day the girls decided to run away from the school to their own village. To find the way home, they followed the rabbit-proof fence to their home, and for that way they needed nearly 9 weeks. On September the 15th, 2000 to October the 1st, 2000 were the Olympic Games in Sydney, a city in Australia. Kathy Freeman is an Aborigine born on February 16th, 1973 in Mackay, a city from Australia. In the 400-meter run final on September 25th, 2000, Kathy Freeman wins with gold and she became the Olympic champion. Now I'm showing you a short video clip where Kathy Freeman wins the 400-meter run. In 2019 to 2020, there was a massive bushfire in Australia, triggered by broken power lines, lightning, arson, and the climate change. The fire was in every state, and it spread over 126,000 kilometers. Because of the big fire, 133 million mammals, 2.46 billion reptiles, 180 million birds, and 51 million frogs had to die in pain while they burned. After the big bushfire, experts think that today just 40,000 to 80,000 koalas survived, because over 10,000 of them died, and experts also believe that the koalas all die out. After 240 days, on March the 2nd, the fire was extinguished. I hope you liked my history presentation about Australia. It took me 2 days for making this, so yeah, thanks for watching.